Well, all the snow this winter has helped improve the drought conditions, but it's just the proverbial drop in the bucket of what we need to make sure we'll still have drinking water for our kids and grandkids, especially in some parts of western Kansas. The governor and Republicans have said securing the state's water future is a top priority this year, but only on cake. Some say there's one practice holding up the process. Miller drilling has stayed busy this last year. One could almost say too busy.
Drilling a new water well for them.
Why?
Basically, they don't have any water.
It's a refrain this Central Kansas company has been hearing for years.
We had a major drought back in 2011 and 12, and the groundwater never really recovered from that.
One that's only gotten louder and more persistent recently.
49 years since I started drilling. It's probably about as bad as I've ever seen it.
Some places we might have been able to get by with a 30 or 40 foot well, and some of those now we're going down close to 200 feet.
You know, you could just pump it by hand and get water. That's how close we were to water. You could have a faucet on it, and there's a big tank set over there, you know.
Retired farmer and current state lawmaker Joe Syward of Pretty Prairie knows exactly what the Millers are talking about. He's had to re-drill the well for his home 3 times, deeper every time.
And if you can't get water, what's your house going to be worth? Mm-hmm. Who's going to buy it?
A recent survey in Wichita showed the top priority people want the city council to work on is drinking water.
We're still in drought and obviously worried about going into phase 3 of drought, which could have a huge impact on our economy and our community.
So it might surprise you to learn drinking water isn't the biggest use of water in Kansas, a state where agriculture runs so much.
About 84% of the water use in the state of Kansas is for irrigation. It is by far our biggest user, and it is primarily the reason that we're seeing water levels decline in some of those areas.
And you look at some of these tree rows, you can see the dead ones.
And in fact, Syward says he's seen on his land.
That river was a huge river when I was a kid. Grew up in our backyard. You could hardly walk across it as kids because it was 16, 18 inches deep. Now it's 3 or 4 inches deep.
Well, what do you think the difference is?
Well, you know, the 1,200 and some irrigation circles in Reno County along the rivers, you know, pulling out 1 million gallons a day.
He insists it's not the irrigators who are at fault, though.
It's not the farmer's fault. He could not pump that water without that permit. I can't put in a well without a permit.
But the state.
That's not the farmer's fault. He is doing what he has to do to keep his water permit. You know, he's kind of between a rock and a hard spot, too.
It's a policy Syward refers to as use it or lose it. If an irrigator doesn't use all the water their permit allows, they lose their permit. It's a policy the Department of Agriculture's Division of Water Resources says doesn't exactly exist.
That's always out there, but it's really for the most part, myth than fact.
That's because of a 2012 change in law that allows irrigators to get what's called a multi-year flex account, where they get a 5-year allocation of water with no limits on what they can use in any one particular year, as long as they don't exceed the 5-year total. Something Syward calls a step in the right direction, but still not enough.
We're pumping a third of the Mississippi every day when they're using it.
So while I was at the State House, I asked the governor, who says water is also one of her top priorities, if there's any talk of dropping the water allocations entirely from the permitting process.
There is talk, particularly on that use it and lose it. That's such a dumb thing. It's dumb wherever it is. So that whole use it and lose it has always been a bad policy. So we are having conversations with that.
These decisions that led us to this point where we have a declining water situation really were public policy decisions going clear back to the 1950s.
The question is, will a Republican supermajority get along well enough with a Democratic governor to make changes that could upset some Kansans?
It's a cultural shift as much as anything, getting people to understand they can use less water and still be productive in their farm.
You have a lot of people who have a lot of skin in that game, and so it's sensitive.